Hello and welcome to a new episode of Shortcut, the podcast that takes you on a shortcut to developer experience, developer productivity, and product engineering. I'm Morten.
And I'm Marilag. And today we have a very special guest, Thomas. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
So, Thomas, you have a long history in the tech industry. 30 years, as I remember. So that's a lot of stories to unpack. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience? Now you have been a CTO for several successful companies from startup to scale up, and now you're also helping a lot of different companies of different sizes as an interim CTO. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so as you said, I've been working in the industry for 30 years, mostly as an engineer, as a developer, but as a consultant, so always in small companies. And I've been doing actually also quite unsuccessful startups, but we'll keep those. I think the most, prominent thing that people might know me for is the past 10 years where I was working for Templafy. First, I started out 2 years as a consultancy where I was working for Spear, a lesser-known successful startup that eventually got acquired by MasterCard, but I worked for I worked for Templafy, where I was doing the first commit, and we got a lot of funding. I think Templafy ended up getting $200 million of funding, so quite a ride. And I built it from the first commit and ended up having at the max, I think 80 engineers and 20 people in the product department, and this growth from, one team to two teams and doing 3 acquisitions where you had to get engineers from different companies into the culture, that's been, quite a learning experience for me, where I definitely saw a lot of things about what ways of working and also, how to build a good product. As a side note, maybe slightly about Templafy, for those of you who don't know Templafy, it's an enterprise B2B product for document generation. Think Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and we can say it's Novo, Maersk, UBS, Ericsson, Deloitte, Philips, Adidas, SAP. I can go on.
All the big companies,
and we install software on their PCs, and to even be allowed to install software on these highly regulated companies' computers, you have to have a lot of technical excellency in the ways of working. And we'll come back to how we work, but we did 30 production deployments per day for these companies, just to put it in perspective. But we'll come back to why that matters. And as you said, I'm now not working for Templafy anymore. I've stopped 1 year ago in October 23. And I started building an open source product called Platform, where I want to kind of help people codify. I want to codify some of the technical excellency things we did in Templafy with CI/CD and deployments and tracking, logging, accessibility, localization, all those things that you need to have, but no one has time to do. And also then I get a lot of requests from different companies, mostly small startups, where as you said, I've been working as interim CTO. I mean, that's what I call me. This might not be the official title, but I'm coaching the C-level team and also the engineering team to adopt some of the practices that I learned at Templafy specifically.
Okay, this is going to be a very, very interesting session. I would love to pick your brain. I know that you love working with startups, apparently. And one of your guiding principles is to keep everything simple. But, simple is not easy. So do you have some sort of a framework for success, especially in keeping things simple?
I wish I did, and I could write a book and get, but the thing is, it's hard. It's not the hard things, it's simple to do hard things. And one of the things that I did learn and that I would love to talk about is the concept of empowered engineers. I think the way that engineers are working with product organization and also the business is, at least from what I see when I come out to these startups, and also what I saw in Templafy, is that there's a lot of, I would almost say, silos. Even though I work in smaller companies, I still see these things where there's handovers and maybe worst case, there's outsourcing where, okay, the engineering thing is something we can outsource. And I also have to frame it, I know you had Rasmus on the show, and he has been working with Lego and Maersk, and these are different kind of organization more than you work for Novo.
Yeah.
It's, the tech is not the product for Lego, Maersk, and Novo. I'm used to work for companies where the tech that I'm building is the product. And here we need to make sure that the product is is everyone's responsibility. And that's why I don't like the silos. And I often, unfortunately, I see it quite a lot, that the commercial part of the business with the CEO and don't really think about the product. It's typically, in sales-led companies where you have a lot of, they're called SDRs, ADRs, and account managers, customer success man, technical support that talks to the customer, and then they go to the engineers and say, oh, we have this problem, go fix it. Well, I wish it was that. That's not what's happened. They go say, we need this feature, go build it. And the engineers don't know. So I would like to talk about this whole flow as well.
Yeah. And so, usually we would start with the why, or someone clever once said start with the why. Now we got a little bit of an introduction, but I'm curious, why is it important for companies to have this product mindset? Why do we need to bring that all the way up to the CEO?
Yeah, I'm kind of like just alluded to it. So, but again, in a tech company that I've been working with, the product vision and the business vision is the same. It's not different, and that means that we need to make sure that whoever's building the product understand the vision, the problems we're trying to solve for our customers. And we all talk about, customer pains and solving problems. And you said the why. We talk about outcome versus output. Sorry. And I see that a lot of companies have a very hard time, adopting this mindset, especially when they grow. In the first few days, when there's just the CEO and the CTO, everyone is informed, and everyone probably this is the co-founders, and they are aligned. But then already when they start hiring the first engineer and the first salesperson, the silos start to build up. So that's not good. And I really think that ideally we need to set in already there, but a lot of us is working for companies, or a lot of you would be working for companies where that's too late. And now we have to adopt these practices of understanding how to put engineers into play when building the product. And I'm specifically talking about engineers because the product people, product owner, product managers, will come back to that. Hopefully they're already involved. But I see the engineers are often not involved.
Yeah. But is that important for the ways of working in these smaller companies like that? That the engineers not just focused on being a feature factory. Often I would imagine for startups that they're very much focused on getting new features out to the customers to be able to sell more, get more traction. So I imagine a situation where the developers in the companies, smaller companies, are very focused on delivery, and maybe are not so much involved in discovery and testing things out, and that's maybe left more to the product people. Do you see that that's important and that's lacking in companies?
Very much so, and you use two very important concepts here: delivery and discovery. And I don't know how many is aware of the difference, but discovery is going out, figuring out what are the customer pain and how can we solve it. And that often ends up by the product people, by, ending up, or we solve it by building this feature. And often it's, the ideas to new features comes from customers or executives. And let's say, and because that's what I've seen the most, that the executives don't have a technical background. Then they start inventing things that, that would be nice to have. And they maybe involve the product managers, product owners, whatever you call them, even though there's a big difference between the two, that then goes and tell the engineers what to build. And the challenge is that we are all engineers as a background here, and we have a lot of knowledge about what's possible with technology, especially with AI and all the things that are happening now. We know, now this thing is just now possible. But engineers are often not even invited when, the roadmap and their ideas is brought to the table. So I'm a huge advocate for making sure that engineers are involved in the discovery part. And it's hard because most engineers that I have been working with is, we are maybe a bit on the spectrum. We are a bit introvert and we don't like to talk to customers, and actually it would be more fun to just do the algorithm or write the code. But if you look at how most of the good products you all use in and out from, Microsoft and Google, we talked earlier about Airbnb, and most of these products are built by people where the engineers are very much in focus. And I think that is one of the things that I really advocate a lot when I get around, and also the past many years, both in Templafy and before that, that we need to invite engineers into the product discovery. And we need to be very explicit about it, because unfortunately, and if I will take a detour, we have been working with Scrum, and the product owner comes with the story to the engineers, and maybe there's the refinement the week before, and they get to Poker Plan, but it's just way too late to involve the engineers into the.
But do you think that's because maybe there's a tendency that the product owners, or maybe the tradition in Denmark or Europe, is that they're maybe not so much focused on the outcome if they're focusing on features and making stories for the developers? Do you think it has something to do with outcome, or?
Yeah. I think Agile is. I love Agile, and I've been part of the Agile. I was part of a company that was the first company part of Agile Alliance in 2001, I believe, in Denmark. And back then, the whole idea with Agile was great. Then Scrum came around and taught us all how to do it. And the problem was that eventually Scrum just became this thing where, we all know we do this. Best case, if you even run Scrum, you do Monday morning, you do the sprint planning, then you go into the stand-up, and then you do the thing and potentially releasable software at the end of the sprint, do a retrospective and a sprint demo. And it just becomes a factory. It's like just a feature factory, and we don't have a way to make sure that innovation happens where we bring in creativity. It becomes a feature factory.
Yeah.
So definitely.
And it's become very robotic and introduced, as you mentioned, this silo that someone else is writing stories and acceptance criteria. And sometimes the product owner is not even the product manager. So that person who's writing the acceptance criteria is not close, has a silo between them and the customer. And then you have the engineers that just accepts the acceptance criteria and then say, it's not an acceptance criteria, I'm not going to build that. So we need to move away from that. But do you have any bit more pragmatic? You mentioned that engineers should be part of the discovery or the ideation. Is there a pragmatic methodology for that? Like you call for an ideation for a day, a week, or is that all engineers, or is that just a streamline engineers? How do you have any experience on how to make that work?
Yeah. But I'll just pin that and comment one thing you said. You said the product manager creates the product owner and delivers. And what you're describing is SAFe. I have not worked with big companies, but a lot of big companies are working with SAFe, where the product manager and product owner is completely different. Yeah. And it's just, there's nothing agile about SAFe. So I'll just pin that there.
We can spend a whole episode.
I'm not a fan of SAFe, but let's just say. But you said, is there a way to codify this thing about how we should then work? And I have 2 books that I keep advocating for everyone. And since I'm an engineer, they were, I was a bit surprised to find the 2 product books are really good. The one is called Inspired by Marty Kagan, who is, advocating everything I say here. And people who listen to Marty Kagan will probably say, I'm more or less saying the same. Marty Kagan is a bit proactive, and some things he's like a bit too, yeah. But there's another great book that is touching about what you asked here, and that's a book called Continuous Discovery Habit by Teresa Torres. And it's all about, you make sure that this discovery thing that we're talking about is not something you do once per quarter or once per month. You do it weekly, and the people who's doing the discovery is the people who built the product. And we talked about product managers versus product owners, and it's not the product owner or product manager that do the discovery. It's the product manager and a tech lead or an engineer from the team, an empowered engineer, maybe also a product designer, depending on how big teams you talk about, because it tends to become big. And what they do is on a weekly basis, they conduct interviews with customers and in pursuit of delivering business value, trying to figure out, we have this problem that we're trying to solve. Maybe you don't talk with customers about user adoption or whatever, but it might be talking about the pain points the customers have, and then you try to come up with different solutions to those problems. And when we talk about these empowered teams that I'm advocating for, they don't get to build this feature. They get to solve a problem, because the problem with a feature is you can ask a team to build a feature, you launch the feature, you celebrate, and it's good. And what I'm not seeing in basically any Danish companies that I've worked with or almost not even talked with, they don't measure if those features that they deliver brings the business value or the customer value that they were hoping for. And I'm not only talking about revenue, but you might build a thing to help customers, users be more active in the product. Then measure it. And you might build this feature because you want them to use your product more. But often you see that you built a feature and no one's using it. Then why did you build the feature in the first place? So when I talk about these empowered teams, it's not only giving them problems to solve instead of features, it's also measure the success of teams by the business impact that, right? I mean, measurable business metrics, which is hard, because now you have to figure out what metrics are actually generating revenue. And it's so much easier to say, I have this great idea, my guts tells me if we built this feature, or the CEO could say it, our customer say, if we built these features, everyone would love the product. And maybe they're right. What if they're not? So I lack that we use telemetric much more in our product to make sure that we are actually delivering value to our customers.
Yeah, and if you involve the whole engineering team or empower the engineers to be part of the discovery, they can also come up with that same metrics, right? Not just their engineering metrics, but also the product metrics itself.
Exactly. I mean, there was this very famous coach. He was actually a American football coach who became the coach, the $1 trillion coach, because he was a coach from, he's called Bill Campbell. He was a coach from Steve Jobs, Larry Page, Steve Certain, and Dorsey from Twitter, and Jeff Bezos. And he had one quote where it says, "Nothing beats an empowered engineer." And it means so much, making sure that we bring the engineers to the table, because they know the technology, and if they know the customer problem as well, they can connect the dots. And often when you see a new startup with a CEO and a CTO or technical, that's because they have an idea. So typically in that startup phase, you have an empowered engineer, and then somehow we lose it when we grow. And I wish that we could go fix it.
That sounds like that some of these companies are not maybe super aware of the importance of having a feedback loop, that the developers also get that feedback and learn to become better at what they're doing. If there's something in the product that's not working well, that they get that feedback also from the customers of their using that feature that they built.
To be honest, I haven't really seen any of the companies that I'm talking to here in Denmark that are working based on metrics. There might be a few companies, and I don't know enough to mention them, but I heard about a few companies that do. But exactly, I'm not even sure that the product people in the Danish startups are looking at these kind of things. I mean, it really feels like a feature factory. And whenever when we see a American TV show or a movie about any kind of startups. They always have metrics and say, oh, we can see the number of users that are hitting the website, and they discover it, instantly. No, because we don't have these metrics. Typically, we might have metrics on the response time and the number of exceptions and maybe the load on the database and CPU, but that's not business metrics. I'm talking about usage metrics. How many people are using the product? Where do they click? Where's the, I think maybe in e-commerce, it's so clear that, okay, people add things to the basket and then 80% don't complete. In retail, in that flow, it's so clear because it's literally bottom line. But if you're building any kind of other kind of product, it's not that clear what metric you should measure. But try.
Yeah, especially for engineers. And I think I'm going back to your favorite topic with Scrum and Safe. If we are, so used to and are successful into using these methodologies, then maybe our focus is more on how many user story points have I completed this sprint, and then just obsessing about.
Yeah, I one thing we didn't do in terms of was estimates. I think maybe, there might have been some teams that did story points, but at least when I started out, we made estimates in story points, and we discussed them, and then we threw them out. We didn't tell anyone, because I'm saying the reason we do this poker planning, I say 13, you say 8, and you say 1, then we can have a discussion. Why do I say 13 and you say 1? We discuss because obviously you think it's much easier than I do. Let's have a discussion. Throw away the estimate because it's the discussion that's important. And actually, I haven't met that many, but I know that, not having estimates is a problem for a lot of people. Don't get me started about deadlines because, it's deadlines is not a good thing when you're shipping software. It's not that we cannot talk about when something might be ready, but if people don't understand what it means to deliver software and build software, we end up treating the deadlines as literally deadlines, and we accumulate a lot of technical debt the few days just before we do the release, because we promised our customers to get it out at this date. Don't promise customers when something is out. And I know it's easy to say, sometimes you are in a situation where you have to, but at least make sure that these estimates that you ask your engineers and give them time to research. Don't go in and say, can we promise this feature? Or when would that feature be ready? And then give the engineers 5 minutes of, give them time to explore. And then I love the idea of, instead of a deadline, make a high confidence commitment, where a high integrity commitment, where I say, I think that we can deliver this, or we think, actually, I don't like the I, we as a team think that we can deliver this thing by that time. And a high confident integrity commitment is much more about, it's a commitment. We don't, like in sales, commitment is not like final. So I like to get deadlines out of our vocabulary.
That is certainly a controversial take on it. Yeah. And I also quite agree. But I think I think deadlines were put there, in corporate practices, just to instill some level of confidence in each other that we can deliver things. If we change our mindset about, us engineers being empowered, and then still be confident that we can deliver what we ought to deliver, we need some best practices. Like, we need to have the practical engineering practices.
Yeah.
So what advice can you give to empowered engineers, and where do they really need to invest their time to get into this state of engineering flow? What's the most important things?
So flow, it's extremely important word in this. We talked a lot about, we learned a lot about the lean startup and the Toyota factory, where, they figured out that you should minimize work in progress and you should ship constantly. And as I mentioned in the intro, we did 30 production deployments per day. And I also talked about the enterprise customers that we were delivering to, which, let's be honest, when we told them, they were not necessarily happy. But there's two things. first of all, it's much more secure to work in that way, because if we do, as we did 30 production deployments per day, and that's, by the way, we only release between 9 and 3 o'clock, never outside business hours. That meant that if we release something and there was some kind of, things that didn't work, an incident or whatever, people were around. But getting into this thing where you do that, then you can start having flow, because you can suddenly start to move fast. But to be able to have a pipeline, a workflow with, that many daily releases, you need to automate a lot of things. You need to automate your obviously your CI/CD pipeline with unit test and integration test. You should have a feature environment where you can regression test, click around, fully fledged environment that you can use before you merge down to trunk or main, where you can test if everything works, even show it to, if there is a designer or product manager that wants to see how it works before we deploy it. You need to have such an environment. Also, you probably need to have feature flags, because if we deploy 30 times a day and we are building this new great feature, a huge feature, where there's a button, there's another, there's a screen, you can't, we cannot build that in one day. We build in a lot of small steps. So you need feature flags to make sure that these things that are not completely done are not exposed to the customers. And building up all those practices around, the delivery. We talked about before this we started here. What about if you have localization? You make a new bottom and now it needs to be translated to 10 languages. And on platform, I have a command that can, do the thing. It can translate from English to Danish and back again. And if it gets the same word back, it's probably a good translation. Then we can start deploying. So there's a lot of practices that you can, you need to instill to be able to get to continuous delivery. And that continuous delivery, again, enables that you can get flow. So you can start if we have these empowered teams that talk with customers every single week, they can talk with a customer in the morning. Now I'm throwing an idea. Talk with a customer in the morning, go and make the feature or a tweak in the afternoon, deploy it out, maybe behind a feature flag for that customer only, and say something like this. And it's something you rarely hear anyone is doing. But if you did that, then you can start getting this extremely fast feedback, where you could also measure the things and see, we released this thing and we expected that the number of active users to go up, but nothing happened. Why is that? Let's try again. Getting the technical excellency for continuous delivery. And it's technical things like CI/CD pipeline with static code analysis and end-to-end test and all the things. And that's just a lot of hard work, but that's what we need.
Yeah, so that's something that maybe the entire product organization need to understand, that they need to invest on upfront instead of having it as an afterthought. But when I say invest, it's probably a tricky question. Like, do you have an idea of how much time for a typical startup, maybe of a single team with 5 engineers? Do you have an idea how much time they would have to use in order to build up this mechanism?
Mm-hmm. So one of the great benefits of, I mentioned that Templafy got $200 million in investment, and one of them was from a big American investment company called Insight Partners, and they had, 500 portfolio companies, and they IPO'd 15 companies in 2022, and I got a lot of statistics exactly around this thing. So every year I was questioning how much time do they use in fixing bugs, technical dev, delivering features, and platform upgrades. And then you ask, and how confident are you in these numbers? And obviously, I had a really good setup, so I could measure it down. I knew exactly the number of bugs we fixed, and every single release was related to a work item in Azure DevOps, and I could see when that work item started and when it was fixed, and which type, if it was a bug or a technical thing or a business feature. So I know the numbers I had in Templafy, and I also know from these Insight Partners kind of like what are good metrics. And If you're doing good, you spend less than 10% of your time fixing bugs. And I think these numbers apply equally for a small startup to big enterprises. I don't know if they are different. Then, depending on how you kind of like split it up, I talked about both technical debt and platform upgrades. Sometimes we just have to upgrade to the newest version of whatever, and it needs to be done. And then there's the platform things where you do a re-architecture of different part of your systems. So I kind of like combine these two into one, But those things, and now I have to recall, is like, actually I think it was 10 to 15% to each of them. Or was it? Overall, it ended up by to say the time you spend on delivering business value, it's 50%. Maybe if you're really good, 60. So that means 40% goes to fixing bugs and technical things, and that's a high number for most. Mm-hmm. But those who are not doing it, is my experience, and also what I've seen and heard, and when I talk to people, if you don't invest in your platform, you will end up either with a lot of bug and a lot of technical debt, and you might spend a lot of time on business feature, but it will just slow down the entire flow. So this is an investment, and it requires quite an understanding from the organization to prioritize that. Mm. And if you haven't done that, you might even have to spend even more. And now I'm not talking about all the outside, all the one-on-ones and all the other meetings that people have.
And all the trainings they have to attend to, and in Denmark, Friday bars.
I'm only talking about when you're actually...
productive, right? Yeah. Productive time. There's actually, in the whole engineering field, there's a good metrics for that. That's pretty common, the DORA metrics. In the companies that you worked with before and now, do you see them implementing that?
Yes, I'm a bit advocate of DORA metrics, and for those who don't know, there's been a study in the industry called State of DevOps since 2012, where they ask, I think, back then it was 30 engineers of 30,000 product people, and nowadays it's still running. I think it's 100,000, 200,000 companies, people that are asked every year. And based on that, there was Nicole Fosgren who did a PhD study and tried to figure out if there's any metrics that are kind of like indicator for if a team is successful. And successful meaning they are outperforming other teams or doing better than peers in the industry, measured on business metric. And what they found is that there was 4 numbers that were significantly predicting if a team was a high-performance team or a low-performance team. And quickly, 2 of them are speed metrics, the number of deployments per day, and the time it takes from delivering code from commit to running on production. And the very, very good teams, they deploy multiple times per day. That's why I picked that number. And since they do that, they can also do it very fast, maybe less than an hour, from writing the code onto running on production. And for most people, it sounds, that can't be, that's insane. But the thing is, if you do it that way, as I said, you can easily bug fix and figure out what went wrong. The 2 other metrics is about mean time to recovery. When you do release some software to production that needs a human intervention, how long time does it take for you to recover? The best team, again, less than an hour. I didn't mention the bad teams, by the way. The bad teams deploy from 3 to 6 months, and they take in almost the same time, weeks or even months to fix a production incident. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but those are the DORA metrics, and I've been measuring and advocating these for a long time, because even though they're quite technical, to get to that level, you need all this technical excellency that is, the foundation or the platform for building empowered teams.
I want to ask a question about developer experience in relation to these smaller teams. But I think we'll leave that as a cliffhanger for next episode. So there's a reason to keep listening also, which is lovely for us, of course. Yeah. But we can continue the conversation for a little bit longer. So I think if you check back next time, then we'll start the conversation again around developer experience in relation to these smaller teams or in relation to startup. How does that look compared to maybe bigger companies? So check back next time. Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Shortcut. If you enjoyed our discussion, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. Sign up for our Shortcut newsletter at our website, Shortcu.tt, and receive our latest podcast straight to your inbox. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, and keep discovering shortcuts to engineering great products.